Good morning from the West Coast. It is early. uh, why did I do this so early? I don't want to be here this early. Well, I hope people got rest. If you're up early with me, thank you for joining. If you're up late with me, also thank you for joining. We will be doing part 2 of our sticker database today. Let me double check things are working on Twitch real quick. My Spotify is like, wake up, good morning. And I'm like, no, thank you. It is too early for that. Anybody in chat mind telling me that you can hear me okay? Things may or may not be on, question mark? While I scroll through my Spotify so I can stay awake. Of course, Twitch is showing me ads, which is not helpful. More ads. Love it. Can't test if this is actually working. Oh, hello. Someone is here. Oh, you've been at the last one too. Hello, welcome back. And I remember you as well. Fantastic. We do have some people then. Cool. I am still searching for not good morning music. I just can't. I can't. Good morning music. There we go. Okay. Cool. Yeah, why did I choose to do it this early? But thank you for joining me so early. Goodness. Let me also get the event link. I came prepared today. More so than yesterday, at least. Here's the event link. We're starting off this Monday with that. Great. No problem if you missed the first part. We did repo setup. I got you. So we did repo setup where we were employing some GitHub things that I taught 2 days ago. And then we did a little bit of setup with regards to React. Give a brief overview of like why React, what are we doing overall, which I can actually quickly run through. Being that last Global Hack Week, not this one, I had some issues with my PC. We didn't actually get as far as we did, but we went through and talked about how to set up a AWS instance for some images with the intent that we might later just, call through an API or through a framework or something, accessing those images and, combine that with Mongo for some easier access to other information. So we also set up our schema for the database where we had a couple of things that we had talked about, things that I'd already come up with because I wanted to reduce some of the time thinking. Schemas can be kind of intense. And we actually might spend some more time today on like general database schema planning. I seem to always talk about that in streams, so maybe not, depending on how the audience feels. And then also I had come up with features last time about things that I'm like, I would love for this to be the case. I really don't think we're going to get to really anything in this feature list, but it is like, okay, once we're done, like what could you do and take it further when you like go back to a recording or something. So as far as pre-work, I had made some sample data, double check that everything worked. And then as far as yesterday, we talked a bit about the MERN stack, which is the MongoDB, Express, React, and Node.js framework. There's also other ones that use Vue or Angular, like Mean. And while these are still relevant today, I did have to double check that they are still relevant because back in my day, etc. So like I said, we did GitHub setup. We did a little bit of Mongo setup in the sense that I'm just like, hey, I've uploaded some data. We've confirmed it. We'll come back to it today. Today is today. We also did React setup, installed Material UI. What we actually didn't get to was designing the UI. We ran out of time just because we were debugging a few people's systems and setups on stream, just because I figured it might be helpful for anyone following along, especially after the fact. And so I did actually come up with some basic designs. I threw it together in an hour, so it's not the most accessibly friendly, which I'm not happy about. Like, there are better ways to indicate someone has a sticker versus not. And I don't think these circles here do it, but I like the idea of it. So I'm gonna like let it sit there. Maybe I'll have a redesign for tomorrow, maybe not. It also depends on whether Material UI will let me do something like this. because I designed it independent of Material UI. But I put that in Figma. I also have a logged in version versus a not logged in version, as you can see from the hamburger menu on the top right. And the idea is that someone would be able to like scroll. Oops, I think I left some circles on there that I didn't want to. Whoopsie. Technically with the logged in, you shouldn't see the circle. Or for the logged out, you shouldn't see the circles, but logged in, you would see your personal collection in the scope of like the whole thing if you wanted to see all of the stickers in a database, which I'm like, I don't know if I should allow that. I don't know. Stuff to think about. But that's kind of where we are today, which leads into today. Hopefully that's a quick review. I'll share the GitHub in just a moment, so that way anyone who's joining today can fork it. We'll be working off that today, and I'll talk more about like what we're doing specifically. I know that some of the text is a bit off screen just because I've zoomed in so much, so I'm fixing that really quick. And then it is 7 a.m. It is 7 a.m. Hey, home state. I'm really happy someone from Florida is here. That makes me really happy, or at least East Coast. Like, I love the East Coast. I do not believe in West Coast, Best Coast. East Coast is so much better. I've heard East Coast, Beast Coast, though. But I'm happy to hear other ones because I need things to combat my West Coast friends. I have meetings right after this, so this was like the best time for me to do it. Like, as soon as I get out of this stream, I have a meeting for PhD things. So, yeah. Looks like it's pretty late everywhere else too. It's 7:30 in the evening. So again, thank you so much for everybody joining. We've had a couple minutes for running through, waiting for everyone to jump in. I know it is early, so we are going to have a much smaller chat, which may mean that like more chance to ask questions, more chance to go ahead and Google things and learn things and come back and be like, well, I found this thing. So definitely looking forward to, if you're able to, I appreciate it. If you're not and you're putting this on the background, I totally get it. School is starting back up again, if not already. So people are just like, yeah, I'm just gonna, have background noise. It'd be like that. But let's go ahead and get into our checklist. So like I said, I did some Figma stuff last night. It is not the most accessible. I really prefer to do accessible design as a forethought and not an afterthought. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that there are a few people who tend to come to these streams who are like accessible development focused. But I don't actually think they're here right now. Because then they would be able to help like, oh yeah, like I think you could look at X. Because if you haven't been to one of my streams before, then the short version is that I don't know everything. And you don't know everything. And everyone in chat doesn't know everything. But collectively, we have a pretty good grasp of a lot of different things. And it may come up that you happen to know something that I may don't, or that chat doesn't, or that I'm busy doing something and someone in chat has asked a question that you can just jump in and answer the question. You are not taking over my stream if you're like helping chat out or helping me out, because I really value the knowledge exchange that can happen during these streams. Again, given that there's like enough people-ish. And while this is quite slow moving, this is beginner's week. So while it can be for everyone, especially if you're more experienced, if you're not familiar with me, just keep in mind that like your opinion and your knowledge is valuable. I like to hear it. I like to see it, read it, etc. And there are times where I'm going to be like, yes, but, or well, I don't like doing yes, but I try to do yes, and, because it's a little more inclusive. Or at least being like, I like your idea and let's do this, rather than, yes, I like the idea, but blah. The only time I'll really do that is if it's just out of scope, because these streams are a challenge to avoid scope creep, which is important as a hacker. And that was something that we talked about yesterday, being that like, hey, as a hacker, when you're throwing stuff together, like, how do you even do that? What do you do? Some people may not have been to a hackathon. This is their first Global Hack Week, or they've only been to Global Hack Week but not done a hackathon before. And so I'm kind of balancing the like, okay, you're learning on your own versus you're doing Global Hack Week as like a hackathon, or you're trying to see what it could be like to be in a hackathon. And I really value learning experiences, even though there's potentials to win things, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, ranting aside. So I did Figma. I like the colors on the layout. Again, I'm not sure if MUI will actually let me do what I want to do, but that's okay. MUI is generally pretty good about inclusivity as far as like having something that's readable by someone using a screen reader, if I remember correctly. At least ages ago, I'm pretty sure it did, but maybe I'm thinking of a different framework. Not every framework is accessibly friendly. And the reason I'm talking about accessibility is that this really isn't talked about in classrooms. I only learned about accessibility development after I finished my master's degree in software engineering. like in my PhD because I was doing social sciences, which was doing research on engineers and engineering. And I'm like, that's not good. We're developers. We're people who are making things for people like coming up. We should be more inclusive. So that's why I talk about inclusivity and what that means for accessibility. And that means high contrast colors so people can read text, making sure to use some way that is easy for a screen reader to use. So using the proper like labels for HTML, and generally just having like consistent design that makes sense, not having it be excessive or excessively detailed. So that way people just don't get confused by like what's going on. Basically make it make sense for people, because if you can't navigate it even as like a sight like seeing person or anything, then no, like there's problems. And there's different ways to make things more accessible, like the font and the size, etc. And we'll come to that, I think, tomorrow, just because today is more about backend and server and database setup, which that leads into today's MVP, the minimum viable product. This is also an important concept for hackers, being that your minimum viable product must be bare bones functionality. What is our end goal of like, if we were to demo this to a judge, like what's the bare minimum we got to get done? And so yesterday's was actually just getting a slightly reformatted React app, acknowledging we would spend a lot of time in setup. Today, we're actually really getting into the meat of things as far as the back end, being that I want a static front page, which would be nice, but realistically, that might be a bit of a blue sky goal. What I really want, though, is being able to pull the records from Mongo, which means having a functioning server. So our real MVP is having a functioning server, which I am cheating a little bit, but I'm also not cheating in that I'm using a tutorial, because there are some things that I always forget to set up, because I'm like, there's so much room for error that I could just copy the tutorial and explain what's going on, because I do understand that. But like things change, libraries change, usages change, and I am out of date. So better to follow a tutorial, because that's also what hackers do. We use tutorials because we don't want to reinvent the wheel and be like, well, I think you're supposed to use this line, and then just keep going like you're right, which is wrong. Don't do that. So in short, today is a database day. Yay. I end up spending a lot of time on databases. That is the one thing I think, besides Googling, that I think I'm actually pretty good at, is in setting up databases, that I'm really good at coming up with good schemas for the different objects that we're having, and then just tossing some data in. To that point, real hackers use tutorials. How else are you going to learn? And so really anyone can use a tutorial, regardless of whether you call yourself a hacker or not. I know that the word might feel like, oh, but they're a hacker, but I'm not yet because I haven't done X. And that's okay. Like you label yourself however you please. But for this moment, we are hackers today in this beginner workshop. But yeah, as you can see, I don't remember everything as far as code access, because once I set it up, I'm like, whatever. It's not like I'm doing it repeatedly, like git pushes and pulls. And then while I was setting some stuff up for today, I actually realized that I didn't quite tell people how to kill processes or how to fork the repo and then make sure that it works. And if you fork the repo, you're going to run npm install in that folder. So more command line, yay. Just because it won't have the libraries you need. You can't run npm run start until you have the libraries, which you'll have gotten from the fork repo, which reminds me, let me go grab that link. Sticker base. Where's the GitHub? So you can clone it or you can fork it. Best practice would be to fork it. But if you're not sure what that means and you'd rather just clone it because you're not going to like post it on GitHub or do your own stuff on it, just clone it. And again, this is stuff that we talked about 2 days ago. So if you're not familiar with GitHub, just follow along, watch the videos later if you like that. Something that I ran into when I was playing with stuff, by the way, was even though I stopped my server, the port was still occupied. And that happens from time to time. And it's not as simple as just saying like Control-C, Control-Z or whatever, which is how you would quit a server just abruptly, because I never remember if you can do other ways to quit servers. I just force quit basically. So the way to programmatically or command line based kill a server is you need to find the process ID, PID. And React scripts is actually pretty nice and tells you like, hey, looks like you already have something occupying this port. And then it tells you PID colon and then what, like a series of like 5 or 6 numbers. And so you'll actually type kill space -9 space whatever that number set was, hit enter, and that should be like resolve the server like conflicting issue. And what I mean by that is like you can't have more than one thing running on a port. because we are using React, because we are running other things. Again, Node is great for servers. There are other programming languages that do servers as well, but the point is that in order to run a server, you must therefore receive traffic, incoming or outgoing information that communicates between front end and back end. And so therefore you need to open a port to have this happening. Looks like someone wants to see it in action. We'll see if I can get it to work really quick. Let's see, because sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Let's see. I'm just opening my Visual Studio Code and seeing if it'll freak out. Okay, that's fine. And then let's see. Try to simulate it. Hang on. So if I can't simulate it, then perfect. Okay, cool. I can show you this then. Fantastic. So let me very quickly show you this. Let me stop sharing screen, present, share screen, window, and add to stage. Okay. So what I did was I kill the server. I ran npm start again. Turns out it says something is already running on port 3000. You may or may not be able to read this, but the point, I'm reading right off of it. It says in yellow, something is already running on port 3000, probably this like script. And it's found in this repository / sticker base. It might actually be from a different project if you happen to like switch projects frequently. You do have the option of running it on another port. I would generally not recommend that because then you start to lose track of what's still happening in the background. I would generally recommend using what the example is or what the preferred thing is, unless you have a conflicting thing of like, I'm running a backend server and a front-end server, and they're using the same port. Then you should have a different port. So in this case, I'm going to say N for now. And so this obviously means that my server is not running, but you'll notice that it says PID in a little bit of grayed out, which is not great contrast, unfortunately, 94383. And so this takes the guesswork out of things. There is a way to retrieve PIDs, process IDs, using like ls of and a couple other like search for criteria and filter. You'll find a lot of different variants on the internet of how to find a specific process. I prefer ls of just because it's just what I use. I think it's only for Mac and Linux. I don't remember the Windows equivalent. It might be lsf. There are some commands that go back and forth, which might be why I prefer lsf because it uses both, but I cannot confirm right now or in the next like week. So when I'm able to confirm with stuff, maybe we'll talk about it next time on like Global Hack Week or whatever stream I end up doing, if not that. But as far as killing things, we're going to do kill -9, and we have the PID, which is 94383. And let's go ahead and, so now it doesn't give us any information about whether it actually did it or not. So the only way we can really check is just running npm run start again. So if it did work, then it will run and start our server, which is exactly what it's doing. So it just opened a page on the localhost 3000 port. Really good to know, especially when you are working with servers like these, just to be like, well, I can't get it to run. What's the conflicting issue, which is usually going to be a port. Alrighty. So we've talked about those. And check those off. Talked about that. Check those off. Great. We're already like halfway through our checklist. Love it. So I have two directions. I'd really like to do one more than the other, but I want to get a feel for how chat's feeling. Where we could go back to the UI, interact with MUI a bit. With that one, I'm actually using a template that is in a MUI that is freely offered, which again, we use resources around us. So what is there without reinventing the wheel? So that way we can understand it and then learn from it and then be able to do it ourselves later. So we have coding up the simple UI, preferably static, maybe not yet interactive. Again, we'll be copying and pasting, but by attributing credit, we are no longer plagiarizing. We're saying like, hey, we got this UI from X, we are adapting it to do Z, what have you. Then we have setting up the server, which is basically within a subfolder in this project. We'll set up MongoDB express.env, which I'll explain all of these things. And then potentially like write up a few like sample database calls. So which way are y'all leaning, server or UI stuff? I know that everybody's done a lot of HTML, CSS already. I am not confident in my CSS that we will have a good time, which is why I want to do the server stuff. But it is good to know both if you want to do full stack. Waiting to see what chat has to say. Making sure we're good on time. Server. All right, we have our first server request. Sick. Let's do it. All right. So as far as the server, I said it would be more CLI. So using Visual Studio Code through their terminal or through your command line or terminal that you do outside of it. I will be doing stuff outside of it personally, just because I prefer it. I don't know some of my settings on Visual Studio. Some things work, some things don't, and I don't remember which is which. I think it might be my desktop that the prompting stuff is not set up correctly or something. I change settings a lot. It's a problem. It really depends on what language you're using, a bunch of other stuff. But we are going to be setting up, so this is a little bit more helpful in that we are setting up an empty node project for this section, which will then actually like use package JSON and do a whole bunch of other stuff. And this is actually really useful. Create React scripts already does this for you. Names the project, sets up the version, you know, downloads all these libraries and gives you like a full functioning like app. Doing it yourself is a very different experience because now you have to be the one to put all of those things together, which is why I wanted to do it. So again, we are going back to terminal. Let me clear stuff. Stop screen, person, window. There's some good guitar stuff right now in the music that I'm listening to, which I'm like, I want to learn that. All right. Cool. So we are in, or at least specifically, I put us back in the sticker-based folder where the repository is. So if I were to list stuff, it will show all of our Git stuff, Git ignore, node modules, which is going to be our library packages that is found through our package JSON and the package log. Then we have public, which again is going to be stuff we're not touching. And we finally have source, which is going to be all the stuff that we would touch from the front end. So if you are not already in terminal, go ahead and open that up. If you remember from yesterday, we're going to make a new directory, which is mkdir. And so make dir, and we're going to name it server. Again, we are CLI practitioners. We are messing stuff up so that way we can learn how to unmess stuff up. It's good for you. It's good for the soul. Chicken soup for the soul, or your preferred soup for the soul. We're going to go ahead and change directory into it, cd. And again, most of these commands are going to be back and forth. There are some commands and layouts that are not consistent, or how you might use it, or the direction of the slashes depending on your OS, whether it's Windows, Mac, Linux. Mac and Linux are pretty similar, if not almost exactly the same. I'm sure I've upset some Linux fanboy somewhere by saying that, but for the sake of understanding, yes, they are very much the same. Once you get into the nuances, then you can be like, they're not actually the same. But that's neither here nor there. That is not the point of this workshop. And so I mentioned I'm following a tutorial for some of the setup. And so I went and made sure that I found a tutorial that's like published within the last year to 6 months, like 6 months to a year, just to make sure that I have updated current stuff. I actually have Mongo set up already. Like the collection is already set up. If you're not familiar with that, we'll spend some time on that after the break, just to like make sure that people kind of get it. I don't think there's a Mongo workshop this week, or if there is, I don't remember where it's going to be used. I mean, I didn't even mention that I was using Mongo. So we have already set up our React.js. We will have to go back and install Mongoose, but Mongoose is the library for MongoDB. And so as far as the server-side component, like I said, we are doing some setup. All right, so I have 2 tutorials pulled up because I know that there's some missing stuff in the first one that I have. And I'll share these links as well so people can go through it on their own. But this is what we're following for just like getting things rolling. Because again, why reinvent the wheel when you only have 24 to 36 hours in a hackathon typically? Like, make sure you understand it though, because then if you break things, you kind of know. But if you're not familiar with this all, oopsie, that can kind of be overwhelming. And so that's why we're doing this guided process through this tutorial and not just like, do these things, blah, blah, blah. And I don't like doing that. So this talks about the client and just jumping through it. All right. So when we are setting up a server, we do not need to run create React app. That is for our front end. We are doing the back end. So in our server folder, we're going to run npm init-y. And so this will initialize the package JSON. It will also give us like a couple questions. If I remember correctly, it's been like an age since I've done this. Being that things may have changed and it might auto create labels for us, or we just edit the package JSON. I'm not sure. We'll see what happens. But real quick, am I using local MongoDB or Atlas DB, or like Mongo Atlas DB? I am using Atlas because I have an online cluster set up already. I actually normally prefer to do local setups. I always do local setups. So because I have free access through the GitHub Education Pack, I'm using Atlas because I'm like, well, people should know how to work with a deployed MongoDB setup. And so, like I said, in the next hour, we'll talk more about what I did to set it up. But again, if you have the GitHub Education Pack, you have free access to Mongo, including Atlas, setting up an education cluster, which will be free. And I'm keeping it reasonable. Like there's only 4 records in it besides the sample collections they've already given me, just because I'm like, I don't know what the limits of your free tier are, but like I'm following the tutorials and like doing the training and whatnot to get the certificate because like, why not? It's free, or at least it's free to follow along. And then I think I can get like the certificate. Anyway, I've gone ahead and I've run npm init-y. Looks like it's not going to ask me any of the things. It'll take the folder name. It will give me an automatic version 1. We haven't given a description. The automatic main file is going to be index.js. And it's going to say that there's like no test set up or anything, which we will probably address. Keywords, author, license, blah, blah, blah. Once upon a time ago, it used to ask you these things. I think because I put -y, it probably didn't ask me for all the individual things. Because I used to have to sit there manually and be like, 0.0.1 server, you know, all this other manual stuff. But they'll generally be like, if you don't want to change the default, hit enter. So going back to our tutorial that I'm, like I said, going to share stuff. We now want to run npm install. But I do want to show you the folder now, being that now we have our package.json. If we deleted this, there would be no more instance of a Node.js setup or npm anything. The moment we delete this, we have no idea what dependencies our stuff has. It sucks if you delete this. But again, this is within our server folder. So don't move your server folder, don't messing ups. The thing that we need to do now is then tell package.json what dependencies it needs. And to do that, we're going to do npm install. And so we'll need a couple things. We'll need MongoDB, which is how we'll work with things. I don't know. I think Mongoose is the front end version of things or something. But the point is, we need the MongoDB package. We also need Express. This is what I mean by MERN, Mongo, Express, React, and Node. Node is basically like the JavaScript like language, whereas Mongo is our database, React is our front end, and Express is routing. Express tells us like, hey, when you need to make a GET request to our database API, etc., when you need to make a POST request, etc., Express will be one of those things that can be used to help facilitate these things. So if you're not familiar with making requests to things, we'll also spend some time on that. Just like, let me know, because sometimes people are like, yeah, I know what GET, POST, and etc. is. And sometimes they're like, I have no idea what you're even talking about. So please let me know so that way I can see how much time I need to spend on it and allocate accordingly for the workshop. Because again, many people are beginners. I just don't know where people are beginners at. We also need cores. Cores, if you're familiar with front-end work and back-end work, this is your worst enemy. It's certainly mine. If you're not familiar, oh, you pure soul. Cores, when you're working locally, there's a risk of you having competing things. And so as in the world of cybersecurity and hacking, etc., there is a chance that you may receive an attack or like some sort of hack or something from the inside of your computer. Cores is what makes it so that way you can say, yes, it's just me. I'm developing. I'm the one who's doing things from the inside. Whereas like it reduces some of the walls between some of the friction between backend and front end when you're doing local development, because the way you would avoid this is actually by having each of these on a separate server or separate instance within a server. And then you don't have to deal with them crossing because they're different IPs, different this, different that. But because the requests are coming from the same machine, your machine's like, hold up, something's fishy. Like, I don't understand. And until you involve cores to say like, hey, let this one thing through, then it'll be like, oh, okay, like you're messing around finding out. And the last thing we're going to need is .env. And so in the last two workshops, the first part of this one and the GitHub one that I ran, I have mentioned something about API keys or passwords or important information that should not be published. .env allows you to hide your API keys. Gitignore will generally ignore them. We'll double check that our gitignore will actually ignore them, because the moment you make public an API key, anyone on the internet can use that, which means they can rack up money on your key, especially if you've paid for it. If it's free, you're going to hit your limit real fast just because it's out there. So it is really, really discouraged as far as not sharing API keys. But let's walk it back a bit. What even is an API key? Let's say that you're working with something that auto-generates text, or like lorem ipsum. There is a website that you can type in like, give me like 500 words of lorem ipsum, and it's like a bunch of Latin filler. And so there's APIs for that, application programming interfaces, where they'll say, hey, if you send a request to my API that does a specific function, such as generate Latin filler, then give me like some criteria or parameters, and I will send you back things. And that is called a GET request. I'm going to double check and see where people are at as far as chat. Cores is indeed hard. What is what? I missed that in the context of what it is. Or maybe just cores or .env. But as far as APIs, in order to access APIs, you generally need to generate a key, because you need to say like, hey, this is me authenticating my use of the API. If you're using Google Maps or any Google API, you need a key. If you're using AWS, I'm pretty sure you need a key, or at least a username and password, as well as the collection name. With Mongo, you're going to need your collection name. You're going to need the API key, which will be generated. And any database you're using, and that's online, you probably need an API key. And so all of these are just saying like, hey, I'm the authenticated user that can access X database, API, whatever, and this is what I'm getting. And so that's how they track how many things have been accessed, how often, etc., because you have all these instances of having API keys to differentiate these different users, for example, or developers or what have you. So we'd only need those dependencies for now. I'm pretty sure that's the only ones we're going to really need. So we'll go ahead and hit enter. And while that's running, I'm going to keep scrolling. We don't need that tutorial anymore, or at least we don't need that as much. Some of these tutorials can be... Yes, there we go. I forgot what it was. There is a library called Nodemon, which will automatically... So all the stuff that was auto-updating in React, Nodemon can do for our server. And I would use it if I knew how to. But for the sake of making sure that things work for right now, that we push things, we'll add it tomorrow. I will put it on the list, actually. Let me go put that on the list. So that way we can update server stuff. Because we're going to do like... learn about Nodemon. All right. That is a really excellent point, though. But yeah, we're going to do it tomorrow just because I need time to go read the documentation and be like, how do I set this up? I'm sure it's really easy and just like, just run this thing and put this script in. And I'm like, but I want to make sure I understand what I'm doing, so that way I can explain it properly to y'all tomorrow. Because all the stuff I'm doing, I do understand. Like, I know what's going on. I know what the libraries are for. Actually writing the code for it, I'm like, I can't remember. I work in so many languages that I'm like, I think I could do it in this language, but we're not using that today, and things get messy. Yeah. But, all right. So let's go ahead and let's start out. So we have a node modules. We have our package lock. We have package JSON. I'm not going to cat the node modules because it's just not a good idea. Also because there's stuff in it. But I will show you the folder. As you can see, there's like a ton of libraries now. Just adding Express, MongoDB, .env, and cores has given us so many packages. Look at this. There's so many. And the reason for that is because even in those independent libraries, they have their own dependencies that need to be downloaded and requested. And they probably have their own dependencies after that. So things can grow quite big. And you'll understand now why we do not push node modules to our GitHub, because it will bloat things, especially if it's like out of date. If it changes, that's more diffs that need to be tracked that you don't need to worry about, especially if there's merge conflicts. Oh my goodness, not worth it. Do not push node modules. That's more of a convenience thing. All right, so we've done our setup. Now we're going to go ahead and go back to actually coding. We're going to open up the files on Visual Studio Code, and we're going to copy paste some more code. But before I do that, let me go ahead and share the tutorials that I've been using. So that way you have it for your own personal needs, being that I'm using both on purpose. Like I said, I am using both because I don't actually usually like using Medium because there are issues I have with Medium. But anyway, I'm using both because they complement each other, but there was some missing information on either side, and some information was excessive that I'm like, I don't need all of this. Hang on, what's going on? And so I'm kind of bouncing back and forth with regards to using them, because I am like, oh, I know I need this, I know I need this, I know I need that, and then that kind of stuff. I do see that my camera is freezing, but I'm pretty sure my mic still works, so we're going to keep rolling. All right, so let's go ahead and switch back to our code. Share screen. Add to stage. Sick. We're going to go ahead and reduce the terminal. We can actually stop this server again, Control C or Control Z. I think it's Control Z that actually stops the server or something, but I don't think that it actually stops it correctly. Your mileage may vary. I never understood that part / didn't mind. So we have our server folder now, which is awesome. Let me actually zoom in. Hang on. I forgot that I zoomed it out to work on stuff when I was playing with things. Let me fix things. View parents. Zoom in. And zoom in one more time. Actually, double check. It's better. Put that back. Yeah. So we don't need to look at node modules. We just know that we have a lot of folders that have been added. We don't have to, in fact, do not mess around with package lock. Just don't. Just don't. What you do end up touching a lot or messing with is package.json. Make sure everything's good. Okay, yeah. And so we're really not changing anything here, but you'll also see that our original dependencies are now included. And you'll also notice it doesn't include any of the sub-dependencies. That's just what node modules is for. But by including these dependencies, you know what the originating one is. If we were to just like, say, delete cores or something, we could run npm install again, and it would get rid of the folders and like update stuff for us, I'm pretty sure. I think, though, the formal way to actually do this is to like run npm uninstall or something, and then specify the project for the dependency. And then things are better because it will actually go through and find the true dependencies it needs to get rid of. And it will also make sure that like you don't mess up other dependencies from other packages, especially if there's like joint dependencies. So let's go ahead and close app stuff. And this is in Visual Studio Code. So remember, there's two different package JSONs now. We have our server and we have our front end. And Peanut has joined. Breakfast has just finished. So let's go ahead and see what happened. So we don't have a file in here that we can actually work with. We're going to right click on that folder, create a new file, name it server.js or index.js, server.js. And then we need to go and change main to server. So that way it knows to find the right one. We want to make sure it finds the right file. Go back here. And now I go back to my tutorial and I copy paste. 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 Copy. Paste. There we go. And let's go ahead and close this folder so we don't. Okay. So we have const express require. We have named the app express. Listen on a specific port. Notice that we have port 5000 here. This will be our default. And if we were to run this, it will tell us that the server is running on whatever port. What else do we need? Is there anything I need to explain before we move on? I think we need to I need to double check how you run this script. Are they going to talk about this later? I didn't actually fully skim this. What I really want, oh, you don't. Rude. This is why I'm using two. This is why I'm using two, because it's not inclusive. Not inclusive of the information that I want. There's also different ways to do this. So the other tutorial that I shared has a much longer setup of things. One breaks it down, one kind of doesn't. So I will put both up for comparison. Let's make a new folder. Come on, or new file, I'm sorry. New file. Yeah, on alt server.js. Paste that there. Paste. Oh, for the love of, there we go. Okay. And then let me double check some things really quick. I'm just skimming to see if they talk about package.json. Reactor, we're coming back to that. Record last navbar, blah, 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 blah. What I really want is just to be able to run the server. Just for giggles, can I run this? Let me save this really quick. This shouldn't work. Yes, it works. Okay. Now that we figured out that issue that I really wanted to figure out. Sorry about that. I wanted to make sure that I could just run things blindly. All right. So as far as what we're doing, so we have two different sets of code to work with. One builds things up slowly, and we'll go ahead and go through that as well. And one gives us like a whole bunch of stuff that like is a little bit overwhelming to look at all at once. Remember, we're hackers, so we're just dumping things in a file and seeing what sticks, right? So let me go back and finish that other tutorial with all of their different stuff. Let's put this here. Oh my goodness, I want to pick, thank you. And then, so there's different approaches, and we're going to talk about the different approaches and why I'm using one over the other. Mostly because I'm figuring it out on the fly, and I didn't finish reading this tutorial, and I need to figure it out now. Did I just put the same things? No, I put different things. Okay, we're good. And we don't need to worry about that section. Is there anything I'm missing in the other one? Let's see. Server.js. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so let's talk about these two. So these are disorganized and messy. Now let's go ahead and extend that a bit, and then let me go and find this so I have chat. Good morning. And just a reminder that we are going to take a slightly longer break today, like 10-ish minutes, just because it is early. Oh, we'll do that about 15-ish minutes. All right. So the differences between the two. I would put the windows side by side, but then even I can't read when it's so big. So we have importing the library. We have setting up the library, and we have the port. And then we have listening. We can actually find the stuff already in these sections. So let's split up. These two are basically the same, sick. But then we have using cores, using Express, requiring some other stuff, setting up the app itself. And we also have this longer app.listen. The thing is that we're obviously using Mongo, so it makes sense that we would connect to our server. But this one uses Mongoose and just says like connect to stuff. It's like, well, okay, that seems a little easier. I don't know which one is which that would be preferred to use, and we'll double check with Mongo before we go through. But then they also create this item model on this model thing that I'm like, what is model? Where did you get model from? Like maybe I missed something in a tutorial because I read so fast or I skimmed by it. Like what's the model? And then we have getting the items. This is our get request. That's actually pretty useful. So remember I talked about APIs. You can make different kinds of requests. A get request is one that you give it a set of parameters, if any at all, and you say, give me information. Go get me a thing. Go get milk from the store, whatever. Get means to get things from another place, an API in this instance, or a database. So it's like, all right, we get the idea of a get request. We have a URL. We have the fact that it's a promise because we're using, it's a promise. So I'm not really going to go into promises. That is for another day, or you can Google it. But the gist is that Node.js is good at asynchronous calls. Python, Java, etc. are all synchronous languages. Python can kind of simulate async. It's just not ideal. I wouldn't recommend it. And that's generally the opinion of the community from what I understand and from what I remember. When you have a promise, it's like a type of connection. And I guess the way I would to use the word in it is that you're making a promise that data will be sent and it will eventually be received. So you're promising your friend, yeah, I'm going to get you the milk from the store later today. And earlier in the day, you agreed with it, but it will take you time to go to the store and go buy milk and then come back and then give it to your friend. And so when you're working with front end and back end, normally the way front end and back end works is the front end says, hey, back end, give me milk. And the back end's like, yeah, let me go get that for you. And then eventually we'll send it. Not every request will be immediate. So what happens with the front end that you see, that you interact with when it's late, when it takes a long time, when it needs to download, to process, etc.? Like, what do you do? Like, there are ways you can handle it, I guess, where you can say, like, yeah, if this data doesn't exist, just like, don't worry about it. Don't render it. Don't do anything. Okay, but when it's ready later, then what? Do you have to like keep checking and say, does the data exist? You're going to eat time, loading, processing, all sorts of stuff on your front end side, continuing to check if the data exists. And that's where promises come in. Promises handle that check for you. They're like, hey, I got you. When it comes, you will get it. And front end's like, totally fine, got it. And the only way you can indicate that it knows it needs to wait for something but can continue on and do whatever else is async. And a try catch setup. Also wait. So by saying async, we started the idea of a promise. We've said, we agree, I'm gonna get you data, which may or may not appear. There's a possibility that there could be no data, which is what this catch is for. If there's no data, when it resolves, like, whoops, send you an error. Like, I messed up. I broke my promise. When you do get data, you need to then say, hey, so now that I've gotten the data by awaiting for this get request, whatever this is, because I have no idea what the heck item is. I don't know what they're saying by models and stuff. Wait, what was that preview? Where was... Oh, that's hilarious. I love these examples. Always hover over your code. It gives you some fun stuff. Wait, can you all not see that? Yeah, you can see it. Okay. But they have examples of sending JSON responses, and I really like the status 500 of, oh, noes. That's funny. 404, I don't have that. So there's all sorts of errors you can get. Anyway, that was a fun little finding. Right. So in this instance, you're setting the result, the parameter here, setting the items that you've received to a JSON, and you're just, washing your hands of it, called good. So this await is kind of what finishes up the promise in a sense. You're going to try to wait for the data to come through. If it does, whenever it does, set it to a JSON, send it on its way. If it doesn't, throw an error. This is good handling. But I still have no idea what the heck this is. I think they're just using it as an example, as like a sample thing, because there's no GitHub link in that tutorial that I saw. But again, I read it very quickly, and I said, yes, good tutorial. Not always the best approach. All right, let's go to the other one, which is a little simpler, but also not, where I'm not quite sure why things are in different orders. So we have express that was the same. We have requires cores, we have require.n, configuring it. I do actually know that this is correct, so this part's fine. And we're using the same 5000 port. So far, tracks, makes sense. We're also telling the express app instance to use cores, use express. I don't know what express.json is. Creates an express application. Yes, we know that, but oh, I guess it turns the express application into a JSON. Okay, fine. And then we have require routes.record, which I think we'll have to create that file. And then we have setting up the driver connection, which is set up differently than this Mongoose stuff. Remember, is it a matter of the difference between local and online? Is it a matter of a difference in when this was published? Who knows? So let's go Google it. / let's go back to the tutorial and see which does not compute. One sec while I skim. Oh, I see. They said create a models folder and then put item.js and then... Oh, I copied something from the wrong side. Duh. Got it. No, wait, I didn't copy that. Did I copy that? Nope, that's different. Let's go Google. We're going to go Google things. Let me go switch screens so y'all can watch me debug. Or not debug, but like figure out what the heck's going on, which is part of the development process. Share, add to stage. Cool. We're going to go to Google. Express connect to MongoDB Atlas because we are using online. Let's go and filter using tools. And so if we scroll over, we're going to say, hey, anything within the past 6 months. So past 6 months, that's going to put us about July. Because everyone makes tutorials today. Everyone. It's great. I guess. Yeah. But, yeah. Okay. So now that we've filtered our results, come on. Oh, I guess we don't have to. No, I didn't want that. Okay, there we go. So we have a couple things. We have some YouTube videos, classic. We have setting up MongoDB, connecting MongoDB. We'll probably use this Medium article again. We have a couple videos. I'm not going to put those on just because I don't have time to watch them. Deployed application. We're not using Google Cloud. Not deployed. Connect Express application. Geeks for geeks. I don't really trust them. Using a database. Mongoose requires a connection. What's the difference between Mongoose and Mongoose versus MongoDB? Just to make sure that we understand what we're doing. MongoDB lacks support, blah, 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 blah. Midware hooks. Do we actually need it? MongoDB has fewer restrictions. Mongoose enables defining data models, fields, blah, blah, blah. I don't think we actually need Mongoose then. Can we use MongoDB without Mongoose? Yes. We can only use MongoDB for CRUD operation without Mongoose. So what is CRUD? I do know what it is, but I'm proving a point of searching things. That's not what I meant. Programming! I think this is still going to give... Oh, there we go. Okay. CRUD is create, read, upload, or update, and delete. So pretty standard operations, which is different from REST APIs, which is typically what everybody in the world uses. But the idea is with an API, you're not saving state, hopefully. CRUD, I think you're saying... This is an excellent question. Let's go Google it. What is Mongoose for? Why use Mongoose with MongoDB? It ensures data integrity, can be beneficial in projects requiring consistent data structures or when collaborating with a team of developers. An ODM library introduces schemas, enforces structure. You are correct. Predefined data model. Let's see. Can be implemented in the collections, constraints. Can we use it instead? Provides validation. Realistically, it would be smart to use this. I don't think we need to. And the reason I don't think we need to is because we have a very simple structure, something that we can actually enforce on the front end and the back end by using different kinds of constraints throughout the process. So we could sanitize the input on our server, which we could do through our GET request, etc., or whenever we post stuff. So this would be in regards to the uploading. If we are just getting stuff, which we are for right now, we don't actually need Mongoose. It's almost excessive because we don't need to enforce data structure when we're receiving things from our database that already holds our structure. Hey, 404, go leave, go do homework or sleep or something. Thanks for dropping by. But if we were doing things that were more like user intensive, let's say it's a to-do app. A to-do app would be something that you probably would want Mongoose, even though it's a simple structure. What you're doing more than just getting things is that you're making new to-dos. So that means you need to enforce the structure there, which means that there's a chance that someone might insert things or do injections, which are dangerous. So if you've heard about SQL or SQL injections, it's when people are kind of like hacking around your work, your front end, your search, your way of entering things into the database and seeing if they can mess with your stuff. That's a whole other thing that is worth a whole workshop in itself. The short version is that you do need to sanitize your inputs. But that can be done independent of Mongoose, I think. I think it's valuable to understand it independent of that. But I do think we should keep Mongoose in mind should we need something in like the future. Yes, and it's not that it will directly sanitize it, but that it will say, hey, there's an issue, there's an error. Like you've put something that does not match the expected collection or the expected structure or schema, as you will, is my understanding. But let's go ahead and go look at the link really quick. Schemaless design for Mongo. the thing is, you can do constraints in Mongo. So I'm like, you can still do protections on the back end and even within the database. Mongoose enforces schemas, reduces risk of errors, enhances data integrity, blah, 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 blah. Middleware, manipulate data, blah, 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 blah. Custom logic and transformations in the data flow. So yes, and still. You can still sanitize stuff. You can adjust data. Let's say if you needed to build a specific piece of data depending on what someone's like said, I think we can, it would be useful. But I don't think it's useful for us. I think we can get away with not using it, which would reduce some of the complexity. Cool. Alrighty, where is Mongoose? We don't need Mongoose. We'll skip that and delete that in our code, but let's go back and let's go here. We have an Atlas account, database connections connecting to the database, blah, 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 blah. What we want. Alrighty. So it looks like we need the connection string that I will get independently and privately. We will link this on our Node.js Express backend. When was this written? July 10th. Okay, we're good. I'm always checking for recent tutorials because, again, things update. So if I'm using something that's out of date, I'm going to have a miserable time debugging it because I won't know that it's out of date. So I always check to make sure tutorials are like within the last 6 months to a year at most, depending on how frequently something updates. Sometimes I don't even know how many times something has been updated. Maybe somebody's not using this anymore and there's no more tutorials because people don't use it anymore. But people still use Mongo, use Express, etc. Still relevant. We have .env, AO. They're going to plug in all this stuff. We'll do that. We do need to have a password. I don't remember the password. Whoops. And they're going to write the code. All right. So what they have is they're using Mongoose again. Hang on. They're using Mongoose. Wait a second. Why are you using Mongoose? We don't want to use Mongoose. .connect. Okay. MongoDB. Let me sign in really quick. And very quickly going to sign in. Yes. So this is also why I was using Atlas. When you are working with that, you can, in fact, go ahead and have it generate an API key, a bunch of other stuff. What do you mean? Oh my God. Oh. Wait, no, wait, hang on. Is this gonna... I did some changes and I wonder if it's gonna freak out on me because of it. That's annoying. That's gonna be really annoying if I can't do that. That's a problem. I have introduced a bug for myself. How frustrating. I don't... Hang on. Yeah, I messed stuff up by doing that yesterday. That's an interesting bug. Oh my goodness. That's so... I will have to do this after stream. That is outrageous. I understand why, but I also hate it. Okay. The short version is that I made some changes to my GitHub account, and because of that, it changed some personal information. And because it's done that, it cannot connect to Mongo because it has changed. I will be fixing that after the stream today to deal with that mess. That's a... I need to talk to people about that one. I don't know how that one works. Alrighty. Well, the reason I was going to Mongo is that Mongo has tutorials and they would give you all the stuff that you would need to connect to the database directly. So back to Googling rants. I really wanted to go to the source, so maybe I can get like MongoDB documentation. Express. Yeah, let's use their tutorial. REST API, project architecture, MongoDB Atlas database. Here we go. Project tree, server env DB connection. What is MJS? I suppose it's a global connection, main entry point. We have, oh, there's an example. Setting the environment variables. I'm just copying the Atlas URI because I'm going to need that, and when I get my data, I will put that in. What we are missing though on the server side, by the way, in our folder, we're going to make a new file called .env. Paste that in there, which is what they're doing here. This is a .env file, and then I need to go double check that our gitignore also ignores .env. Yes, it ignores .local, .development local, .test, just ignore .env too, for the sake of you don't trust. So we did some little updates there. Replace credentials. I will do that later. .env config. We already have that in our code. I'm just double checking. And import .env. And then we have other stuff that I'm skipping. Database module. That's what I was looking for. I was looking for Mongo client. Thank you. I don't want to use Mongo Boost or Mongoose. I just, this is what I wanted. Copy. All right, let's go fix whatever the heck's going on in our code now. Let me look further. REST API. Thank you. That's what I wanted. We'll skip routes. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So I have copied this code. Let's go back to our code. Stop sharing. Open up. Share window. Share. Stop doing that to me. Thank you. Okay. All right, we're going to paste this code and we're going to take a break for 10 minutes. I'm tired, but we're making progress. We did have a functioning server. I don't know if we're still going to have a functioning server at the end of this. Mostly because I need to get some configuration of stuff put together. And then we'll, like I said, switch. Well, we can't actually talk about MongoDB because I broke it. Cool. Cool. Just another day as a programmer. It's fine. Let's go paste it. All right. Import Mongo, connection string, blah, 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 blah. Let's go look at the old server.js. They made this stuff. We don't want this stuff. This is their routing. What do I like more? I actually like, let's get rid of that. I like this part. DBO require DB connection, which we're doing elsewhere by having con. And then where are they using it elsewhere? As perform a database connection, DBO connect to server. We don't want that. We want just the API call. So we're gonna comment this out. And we're gonna paste. Okay. Move stuff up. We don't need this anymore. And we're gonna leave that. We already have port established. And we're gonna move this up so that way. Something I've also seen, you'll see that these are kind of different actually. There's two ways you can write things with JavaScript. Or there's actually many ways you can write things with JavaScript, but the two things I see the most for importing is that you will import some like object from a library or to use require. It's a little bit of preferential opinion. It's a little bit of like, be consistent, and we are currently not being consistent, so we might have to go and fix that and whatnot. But this so far, fine. This is also fine. Not super sure about that one actually. This we do need. This is all good. I'm not gonna mess with that. But you'll see that like things are different like between this section and the database connection. So this one they use con.db, get the collection where we are using stickers, I think. And then the connection string is retrieved from the .env file, which we're dealing with that. Let db, con.db, console error, export db. Okay. Let's see if this one works, because I'm pretty sure that's not going to work. I'm going to very quickly just go and yeah. It doesn't like that. Doesn't like import Mongo client. I'm pretty sure it's going to yell at me anyway. Yeah. Can I just do, let's see. Node.js require Mongo client. Give me the documentation. Require. Heyo. There we go. If we were to, no, that's not what I want to do. Copy. If we were to replace this line with this line, I don't know why I happened that. That's what that would look like. This is no longer relevant. Right? Require. Why don't we just do this? Mongo. Oh my goodness. Mongo. And then I'm pretty sure is equal to, let's make that a const. And I'm gonna do Mongo client. And then what was using new Mongo client? Haha. It's probably still gonna have an error. I'm just running npm start in my terminal right now to see if it'll work. Hey-yo! Okay, let me go switch that really quick. And switch back to stream. Percent share screen server. Cool. So what I was doing here was run npm start. It told me there was an error. It didn't like that I was using the import, the other way to do imports. And it's saying that it can't use an import statement outside of a module. I don't know what that means, but I thought it was because I did it wrong. So that's when I removed the, I'm not sharing the screen. I'm so glad I caught that this time. Let's go back a little bit. All right, npm start to run server. Don't have to do anything in scripts, just run npm start. Super easy. Yeah, it was like, yeah, I don't know what you're looking at. It was like, can't find it. Don't know what it is. Cannot use it. Not safe. So I removed some more curly brackets, and then it was like, nope, still can't do it. I was like, okay, let's reverse it so that way it's consistent with everything else that we have. And there is a method to the madness, at least in the sense of like, let's go Google why it's wrong. And so the thing that it is complaining about is that now it's complaining about await, but at least we have gotten past the library issue. I promise I know what I'm doing sometimes. And the answer is that it's not a fan of await. Only valid and async functions. Oh, did I forget to put this in a function? I must have missed something. There was an await. What happened to the await? How did this end up without the... Oh, I see. I just didn't do the... Let's go put that in. I'm looking for connect. So I'm also pulling up the documentation for Mongo client, so I can be like, how do I use this? Because they will give you examples. Let me go give you the link for anyone who's curious, actually. Let's go move that here. All right, so this is what I'm using to figure out why things are doing the things that I do not understand. Let me go swap screens. Quick. No. Okay. Let me also zoom in for people. This is what I'm using to be like, what's going on? Why do things suck? And specifically, I'm just scrolling straight to the example. Like, what do I do? So here they have connecting. They have a bunch of stuff. Is this supposed to be within a function, actually? They have client. Do they have an await instance where they have an example? Your connection. I just want to see if any... Wait. No one has it. All right. MongoDB. Client, await. Let's go see if anyone has an example. MongoDB native driver. Stack Overflow. What if we have to use Mongoose? I really don't want to. Node Mongo. Connections are reused. We'll go ahead and open that in a new tab. Oh, they have it here. Async function. Find one. Okay, we'll just then we just go back to our code and do that. Let's go switch code. Present, share screen, window. Sure. All right. And good. I did it right. All right. So the answer is that we need to put this in a function. Kind of like it is here, but I wanted to make sure that I understood what I needed to put in the function, which was I don't need to get anything from it. I just want to find one, it says. So, goodness, I cannot read this one. It's so zoomed in. There we go. All right, and extend window so I can read. So we have an async function. After the stream, I'm going to go double check the Mongo, what's it called? Documentation through the actual like setup and everything, because I need to go fix some settings. But I'll double check that this is actually right. And if it's wrong, I will push the correct changes. But we might not have a working server by the end of this. Rats. And then as soon as I'm done with this, we're going to take a break because I need a brain break. We have client. We have this. They await a connection. So we actually want this stuff. Paste. That. And then find one. What are you doing in this? URL parser, cat, shift client, try client DB collection. Let's copy that. So let's try the connection. And then after we connect, we want to see if we can just use the find one query. We can change some of this. I believe we're using, we can do amount. And we can do, I think it's like, is it ampersand less than 2? Or is it, I think I can just do less than 2 as my query. Let's not do that. Let's just leave it as, what's one of the fields I'm using? Source. Source, snacks, DB collection, stickers. And right now things will not connect, so we're gonna ignore the default. This is all supposed to be within a try. I don't think this is actually gonna work, and that's okay. That's what we're figuring out. I will definitely have answers by tomorrow, though, because I will have had time to figure out what's going on. Some BS, that's what it is. And then they have this. Okay. Oh, why do people have so many freaking... Do that. I don't know why this is... I have an extension that tells me when things are bad. Like, why so many? I know, I get why I don't like it. And then, okay. Call the function, save npm start, see if it works. The wait is only valid in async functions in the top level bodies. Oh, this is the same issue we had last time. That's fine. Oh, I know why. Let's see if it'll run now. Yeah, cool. The error I expected. Okay, finally. The error I expected was that it couldn't connect because I don't have the information updated. Time for a break. Let's come back about 10 minutes. Let me fix this. Coming back at 8:25. Let's just save. All right, BRB. Hello, we're back, and I'm running over my headphone cord. Alrighty, we have about 20 minutes left, and so I want to spend some time talking more about GitHub and how we can properly set this up as a dev environment and work with people, blah, 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 blah. All that to say, we're going to do some branch stuff with the terminal because we are at a point where, while I wanted to have talked about database stuff, I literally can't log in because I done goofed. So that will be tomorrow, or you're welcome to Google on your own, or we'll speed by it depending on stuff. But the point is that we do have a functioning server. It will just not run because it can't connect to Mongo because I don't have the right stuff for Mongo right now, which is fine. I can easily fix that, push that, make sure it all works later today when I have time to go and debug and fix things. Because at least it's telling me that it can't actually connect because it has the wrong information, which I'm like, yeah, we're good. We are set. That said, we don't really need, frankly, anything else from this. Like we can delete that. Just to wrap up here, we don't need that. We fixed this section, fixed that section, fixed that. Did the alternative for MongoDB client. The only thing is probably this, but we already have a connect to server. We don't. We don't actually need it, I don't think. We're going to keep it anyway, just in case. We're going to also not save this file. We're actually going to delete the file, but we are going to paste this here, and we're going to comment this out so that way we have it. Let me close that because I don't need that. Hit save, blah, blah, blah. Con. Oh, yeah, let's just move that into... There's some other stuff I wanted to get to, but bugs be doing bug things as they do. Why do we use const anywhere else? No. Why are we doing it that way? constdb, testdb. That's not actually the name for it. I have to fix some things here, I think. That will be a once I can connect to the database and get more errors to see what's going wrong and what I've done wrong, then I can do that. That's fine. But like I said, we are going to do some GitHub things. So let me swap us over to the terminal because we practiced CLI this week. Cool. And now do stage. And of course, during this point, let me also get rid of the banner. At any point, you're allowed to ask questions. I know we didn't do a great job explaining servers, or at least getting it working. And we did have a working server beforehand. We could have pushed that. But I do want to emphasize the point of like, currently it is not working. Merging it in, we would therefore break stuff in that we couldn't run a backend server. But why do we have it on main? So the last two workshops I've talked about development practices and how when you are working with a team or trying to develop a product or anything, you always want to have a functioning project on your main branch. And so if I were to do git branch, it'll tell me that we only have a main branch, and that's from our local instance. And it currently says with the star that we are on it. So what we want to do is git checkout -d, I think. Or is it -b? I think it's -b. It's been an age. And we're naming this a feature branch. So we're going to just name it server setup. And so it says switch to a new branch server setup. And so there's two ways you can do it. You can make a new branch and then check out the branch. Or when you're doing the checkout, which is what I just did, you can do -b and just create a new one. So we also want to run git status. As it so happens, we've brought everything that we've changed with us. But let's go back up a file because we're currently in the server folder and we're not in our top level stuff, which curious that server is not added. Let me double check in git checkout main, git status. Okay, here we go. So even though we moved, we didn't actually bring things with us to our new branch. Whoops, happens. So in order to do that, we're just going to add, we modified the git ignore because I wanted to make sure that we had a .env ignore. I did modify the CSS and the JS stuff beforehand because I just wanted to like fix some of the CSS a little bit instead of the janky thing I did the other day. And so we're going to add server. We're going to add source, everything in source, and we're going to get add git ignore. Status. And so remember, we are still on the main branch. But you'll notice we have just added all those node modules. What do we not want to do? We do not freaking want to do that. So CD server get status. LS. Yeah, I could ignore. Dependencies. Server / node modules. Only edit the git ignore if you know what you're doing. I don't think I actually know what I'm doing. And let's go, let me go Google this really quick. Git reset, stage commits. I don't want to reset them. I just want to git unstage all. Unstage all changes, revert staging area back to without altering area. Yeah, there we go, git reset. I want to remove all of them. I'm not showing this just because of time and also wanting to rush through this a little bit. Git reset. So by typing git reset and not specifying files, it should undo everything, but it hasn't wiped my files. Therefore, like we still have everything. So if I do git status, everything is still there. All the changes are still there. It is very important to distinguish between reset and remove. Okay. So git add dot git ignore because we changed that. Status. CD server status. Okay, let's go at it again. Git add source, everything in there. Git add server, git status. Aha! We do not have node modules anymore. Thank goodness. We are going to not push alt server though, so we'll git reset server alt server.js, git status, and it looks like it is now not removed. So as far as what is being pushed, with regards to, remember, we are currently in the sticker base, not the server folder, but one up, where we have modified our git ignore. We made sure that the end file is not in there because I made a .env file and it's not in there. You're going to need to make one. We have the server package lock, package JSON, and JS file that we made, and the updates I had done prior. So with that in mind, git commit -m. Wait, hang on. Git branch. We are currently on the main branch. If I were to git checkout server setup status, it still has what we have staged for commit, and we want to push it to this branch specifically. We do not want to push it to main. We want to have a feature branch. So we're going to git commit, and we're going to say server setup. Let's see. It's an Express server. Express Mongo server setup, because we want to let people know what we did. So we've done that. We're going to git push, and it's going to tell us that the branch does not have an upstream yet. Anytime you make a new branch, you're going to have to set the upstream. It will always tell us what you need to do. We're going to do git push -- set upstream origin server setup. All this is saying is that we want to create a new link to our repository for this specific branch. Hit enter. It's going to push it. It has now set up the connection and says, hey, you have a new branch on your remote repository that is called server setup. You also have a local branch, so we git branch. We are currently on server setup, and we now have one in our local or our remote. So let's git status just to make sure. Server alt server, I was going to delete that file. So once I delete that file, it should not exist. Delete to trash. Git status again. Voila, we have updated things and we've pushed a new branch. So let me go ahead and go back to GitHub. I will hit the right button. I want to go to sticker base, go there. And I'm going to share screen. All right. And there we go. So it's saying server setup had recent pushes. That's great to know. What does that mean? That means that now we can go to this drop down main and we can choose server setup. We can also see the branches on the branches tab right here. So we have these. And we can also go look at the commit itself. So we have 3 commits now, and it says that this branch is 1 commit ahead of main. At this point, we have created a branch, a divergence in the code, which means that technically, if anyone were to clone our repository, the main branch, which is probably what they're going to run from, still works. They just don't have a server. They do not see this unless they decide to say, I want to look at the other branch called server setup. So let's say we did have a functioning server, like we got it all good. We still did this route, even though it doesn't work, but let's say it did work. We would then go and say compare and pull requests because that work for the server setup is done. That feature, so to speak, is done. So we might change the title to something like server setup instead. And in the description, we might say like, setup Express, setup Mongo, made sure that the node modules is ignored, all sorts of stuff. In the workplace, you would have reviewers where you might say, hey, these 2 collaborators are also experts in this area of the code. Please review my code to say, yes, we can definitely add it. We've tested it. It's functional. We can then merge the branch into main. So when you can create a pull request, you have to detail all these things. You can give it labels, which may be relevant of like, oh, it's fixing a bug. It's adding this feature that we've talked about. It may be part of projects or milestones, which I'm not really going to talk about, but it varies from company to company on what people do with regards to these sections. Generally, it's good to have 2 code reviews where people have reviewed your commit, this commit, which shows all these additions of things, the additions, the adjustments, what's currently there, what's commented, all sorts of things that people would remove this. So as you can see, I did add the JS and the CSS fixes. Is that really server setup? No. So what I did was kind of terrible in that I added some unrelated things to that feature. That should have been a separate commit because then I have to now say like, oh yeah, we did server setup, but I also did this one thing on the front end, and it's weird. But you can see that it says able to merge. They'll be automatically merged, which means there will be no merge conflicts. Let's say your friend also made edits to that CSS file in the same place, like instead of saying catalog your stickers and adding the class name, they maybe did a different class name and they said instead of catalog your stickers, it's like store your stickers. That would introduce a merge conflict. And then you have to go and do that programmatically. That's for another day. But yeah, and as you can see, even though we know that we're merging the server setup into the main, like it doesn't really make sense. They've actually added this little arrow in recent times. It used to just be like merge, main into server setup. And it's like, wait. I don't understand this order as far as English goes. Like, it just doesn't make sense. GitHub has certainly improved as far as the UI and being like, hey, this branch, the server setup, is being merged onto the main branch to catch it up. This is different from rebasing, even though it is what happens technically. It's rebasing and like playing the commits on top of each other. But like, I didn't talk about rebasing, and I'm not gonna talk about it either, because that's again that's a 30-minute topic we don't have time for. But I do want to give people an opportunity to see like this is how one might do feature work, and also how they might do feature work wrong, being that I added the JS and the CSS. Cool. So we are actually not going to open a pull request because we're not done yet. It doesn't work, and we don't want to push broken code. We could say create a draft pull request, but like, don't do that. And so we want to spend the time to make sure that this works, that we've tested it, because at the end goal is that the server and the React client will work separately. The next goal would be that they actually work together. And so we would do another feature branch saying connecting front end and back end or something like that, or whatever. So yeah. So you can see it still keeps track of it. I'm obviously not going to be doing that. We'll probably do it tomorrow, or I might do it later today if I can get things fixed. But yeah, so we are pretty much good. Nothing else has changed. As you can see on the side, there's like workflows and stuff. So if you got into things like GitHub Actions, there might be ways where you might deploy these automatically with every like merge into main. That gets into continuous integration and continuous deployment, which is not a topic for today. But this is like thinking beyond the hackathon. This is like, if I were to make this a scalable application that people used, what would I need to automate? well, I would need to automate builds. At that point, you look at Jenkins or GitHub Actions. I think there's something in GitHub Actions for it, or using GitHub Actions to use Jenkins and other deployment things like Travis CI and a whole bunch of other stuff. There's lots of different things out there, but I think going back to our checklist, where are we at? We did that. We did that. We did that. And we did that. We basically set up the server, but we didn't get it working just because I broke Mongo and I need to go fix Mongo in GitHub. That's my bad. So we didn't get to this. I might try and do this today just to like get it to a point that I can explain it tomorrow and be like, this is what I did to make it work, because I can't guarantee that I'll actually fix it in 2 hours. And then tomorrow, like I said, somebody mentioned NodeMon. We'll jump into that. We'll get into the UI. I am bad at CSS, but yeah. And then I really do want to get to the Azure part, because you actually need to have like more than just text data. You want pictures, right? So we'll talk about that. I'll do a little bit of prep. And by that point, we'll be able to add in images. That is a lot for 2 hours tomorrow, though. It might be that this workshop is then paused and we continue at a next Global Hack Week where it's relevant, or you take it your own direction and you keep going and decide to make your own additions to it, etc. And as like a bonus thing, we might do something like authentication to have like, based on your login, these are your stickers, something like that. Lots of opportunity and options ahead of you. Again, tomorrow will be at the same time as today. So it will be an early morning for us on the West Coast, a little less early on the East Coast, and very late in the evening for those in India. But thanks so much for joining. I want to open up to questions. I know we kind of rushed through that last bit that I did with pushing. I did want to just incorporate all the stuff I was talking about with regards to GitHub and like see it in action. And you saw how quickly I was able to do that. Like there was no clicking involved. It was just type, go, done, great, cool, whatever. Oops, I forgot a thing. Let's go quickly check back, done. Very, very simple. But I do know that I think you have a mini game after this, so definitely tune in for that. And then after that, you have today in Global Hack Week. So lots of bit of a brain break coming up for y'all. But yeah. Let me go through chat. It looks like there was a couple questions. Let's see. Design pattern, that's a good point. As far as design pattern, I guess you could call it model view controller, but not really. I really didn't design it. I didn't use a design pattern today or this whole week. Shame on me, but I'm also not sure I can answer this ECMA question. I have no idea what this means. Life cycle development. I have no idea what that question means. And then we already have the checklist. We've been going through the plan and the plan for tomorrow. So cool. Any other questions? Thank you for coming. It will be another early morning tomorrow in the cold. I'm kind of surprised we had less questions today, but I feel like people just have this on in the background, which honestly, fair. It's fine. Hi, Peanut. What are you looking at? What's wrong? Are you being Batman? Batcat? Are you enjoying your sun today? If I'm not here tomorrow, it's because my cat ended me somehow. She's just like sitting there, menacing in the background. She'd do that sometimes. Cool. Well, since there's nothing else, I guess we'll go ahead and end the stream. Take that 15 minutes, take a break, drink some water, take a mini nap, whatever it is you need to feel better, listen to your body, yada, 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 all good stuff. Make sure you get rest. Usual claims to things that I would prefer people do better. But yeah, thanks again for joining and see you tomorrow.